Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this week's episode of the Niche Cache Variety Show. We're from the niche-cache.com, the Niche Cache. We love Aotearoa and we love Aotearoa Sport Wildcard. I was watching a bit of Premier League Sport Wildcard. Caught a bit of Manchester United versus Everton, I think it was. And I was curious.
Yeah, I watched that one too.
Just for a bit of a variety show warm-up, how is your Cristiano Ronaldo experience going? You are the resident Manchester United fan, long history with old Ronaldo. Now he's back. He came off the bench. He actually scored a nice goal. I'm curious just how you're feeling about Ronaldo, given your fandom of United and how things are sitting right now.
Well, I do like Ronaldo for nostalgic reasons as much as anything, because at like 38 years old or whatever he is now, he's not the player that he once was. There's a lot of like I don't know, there's just this big like industry of hype around him that builds him up and makes criticism impossible of the dude. Specifically, I think led by a lot of like, all of his old former teammates are pundits on the TV channel now, and none of them want to hear a bad word about the dude. It's just things like, well, sure, he's a little bit older, but he's going to score your goals. He's always going to score your goals. He scores goals at the expense of anyone else being able to do stuff because he's one of those guys who the whole thing has to go through him and doesn't fit the style that the new manager in particular is trying to implement, and didn't really fit the style of the previous ones either, but things were adjusted in order to fit him to the detriment of the team. That's why they're so bad last year. I kind of, part of me kind of thinks Solskjaer would still be in charge of that team if he didn't sign Ronaldo. But he did, and that was his fault. So, but there's a reason he's playing off the bench a lot this season. I'll just say that. Like, it's not nothing personal against the dude. It's purely tactical. Like, he doesn't press from the front. He doesn't work as hard off the ball. He doesn't. He just doesn't. He's not as mobile. He doesn't do what other guys do. But he's a useful alternative to have on the coming off the bench. I think he'd been struggling for confidence though, so that was his first goal from open play this season. That will probably help him out.
Ronaldo was struggling for confidence.
Yeah, confidence might be the wrong word when you put it that way. Maybe rhythm is a better. Struggling for match rhythm, playing a lot off the bench and snatching at chances and just getting annoyed at himself. And there's actually, the weird thing is, teammates kind of do everything for him. Like, there's the game the other week, because everyone just loves playing with Ronaldo. He's playing with guys who grew up idolizing him. So you saw, like, in the Europa League game the other week, guys were going out of their way to try set him up for a goal because he obviously wanted one so bad, and he just kept missing stuff or getting in the wrong spot. And then on the weekend where that wasn't the case, because it was a tough game against Everton, they were trying to win, not the weekend, but it was Monday morning, whatever. There were one or two times where like Ronaldo jumped in front of someone else to win a ball that they would have had a better chance from, and they were getting mad at him. I thought that was a little bit of a turning point there. That's normally everything's been so differential towards him.
Yeah, I did see him go up for a header where Bruno Fernandes was right behind him.
That's what I'm thinking of too. He just slammed the ground and yeah.
Shout out Ronaldo. This is the Variety Show, and prior to this, we have recorded a Patreon podcast. Big up to all the Patreon whānau, and Patreon is the best way to support the Niche Cache and all our content directly. Definitely looking for a bit more Patreon support. So if you are feeling good about the Niche Cache content and you do appreciate everything that we do broadcasting Aotearoa Sporting Excellence, patreon.com/our Niche Cache, EL Niche Cache, and every week we deliver an extra podcast as well as just the generous vibes. We were talking Wellington Phoenix, we broke down their draw against Adelaide United, and we also discussed some Black Caps T20 cricketing matters. Every Monday and Friday we also send out an email dispatch via Substack, thenichecache.substack.com. Sign up every Monday and Friday evening. You get sent Niche Cache yarn. That includes links to the website and all our podcasts, as well as specific yarns and kōrero written for the email dispatch. Monday is usually capping a busy weekend of Aotearoa sport, and Friday we're touching on whatever is relevant. So sign up, because none of this shit is happening anywhere else in Aotearoa sport. So big up to ourselves. Sometimes you got to big it up to yourself, Big up to you listening. the audience members, and big up to us for being here, right here and now. Wildcard, humble me. Big up myself, but also humble me with some mindfulness.
Yeah, I kind of want to use the mindfulness as sometimes you got to big up yourself. That's actually not bad advice. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you got to stick up for yourself, because if you don't, who will? But I did actually have one prepared as well, so we'll go off the script as a quote from Mr. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. The idea is not to regard the spiritual path as something very luxurious and pleasurable, but to see it as just facing the facts of life.
I concur.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful piece, and a lot of people like to celebrate their spiritual journey, don't they? The path of the journey is like, a lot of people like to broadcast, a lot of people like to tell you all about it and everything they've learned, but also you're dealing with the facts of life, and everyone's dealing in the facts of life. So maybe that's just a reminder that your spiritual journey isn't any more important than the next man's spiritual journey or the next Wahene's spiritual journey, as long as everyone is on that journey facing the facts of life. All good.
Yeah, and I suspect a lot of people who build up their own spiritual journey and bask in the luxuries and the pleasures therein and stuff like that. I think a lot of the people who do that kind of stuff are also not actually on a spiritual journey anyway. It's not what they think it is. You're kind of cheating. You're kind of like skipping steps or just straight up heading in the wrong direction. That's probably a clue. That's probably one of those things where it's like a clue. The people who are profiting off it, kind of thing. Like, I mean, there are a lot of I don't know, a lot of people who have probably made a lot of money doing stuff like that, but with a generous heart about it. There's also a lot of grifters and con men and that kind of thing, trying to make cash off of those stuff. So that's probably a good clue. Like the ones who, if you're trying to take what's the word? What's the opposite of spiritual? There's like I don't know. I don't want to say bodily things, but earthly. If you're trying to get earthly rewards out of a spiritual quest, perhaps you're doing it wrong.
Start us off with a leading hot take here, Wildcard, about Aotearoa sport.
Yeah, the football ferns played on the weekend. It was a little bit lost in amongst a pretty absolutely hectic times of football stuff going on at the moment, but the football ferns played. They were away to Japan. They lost 2-0. It was a bit of a familiar story. They were solid defensively, but not quite solid enough over 90 minutes. Didn't really create anything of note against a good team going forward. Following 2 wins last window, clearly this is a big step backwards for the team in their preparations for the World Cup, right? No, I'd say probably, to be honest, this is just more of the same from the football ferns, who are quite possibly one of Aotearoa's most consistent sport teams. It doesn't feel like that way because you get big losses and you get sort of sneaky defeats and whatnot, but you just have to look a little bit deeper at like the fixtures that they have. The Ferns tend to beat teams that are worse than them, such as Mexico and Philippines last window. They tend to lose to teams that are better than them, such as Japan this window. Annoyingly, they tend to play a lot more teams of the latter description than the former one. The work isn't trying to close that gap between the teams that are better than them and the teams that they are better than, like just to move themselves a little bit closer to those better teams, so more teams fit in that box. But that's a work in progress. They were down a few key players in Japan. We're a borderline top 10 nation in the world, always likely to be a defeat. South Korea and Christchurch next month could be something different. But a 2-0 defeat to Japan and Nagano, limited attacking output, is basically just par for the course for the football ferns. Like nothing drastic either way.
Who is more consistent, football ferns or New Zealand Warriors?
Ooh. I think the ferns. The Warriors every now and then win a game you don't expect them to, or they get blown out by a team they shouldn't lose to, kind of thing. The Warriors are more likely to be consistently inconsistent in a strange way. Whereas the Ferns, it's literally just, is this team better than them? Yes, they're going to lose. Is this team worse than them? Yes, they're going to win. Pretty simple. They don't have too many results that, there's obviously some, but there's not too many results that differ from those expectations.
I was thinking bigger picture. I was thinking nothing is more consistent than finishing 13th every year. Like that is the epitome of football Ferns consistency, right? You're losing to the teams worse than you, you're beating the teams, you're losing to the teams better than you, and there's more teams better than you, so you're losing more games. Fair enough. Shout out to New Zealand Warriors consistency. It's got a bit of airtime on the Nichecast podcast last week or so, so good to see the Warriors still in the news cycle. My hot take here, Wildcard, is stemming off the latest Lydia Ko mixtape. Lydia Ko has had 1 win in 19 events this year. And I reckon she is playing the best golf of her career. Her scoring average is the best it's ever been. She has the best percentage of top 10 finishes. She's 2 strokes ahead of the rest of the LPGA field. Usually, Lydia Ko, as I always say, is an absolute fucking beast on the LPGA Tour, and she is in career best form this year, even though she's not winning tournaments. And obviously, the media in Aotearoa, they only care about winning tournaments. But Lydia Ko is playing the best golf of her career, which is absolutely buzzy to think about considering what she was doing 2012, 2013, 2014, and the adversity she encountered in between. So shout out Lydia Ko, she keeps on trucking. Next tournament, I think, is in Korea, which will be a good one for her and the whānau. Vitamin Statistics here, Wildcard, deliver us some statistical information to enlighten us.
Yeah, let's go Wellington Phoenix with this. Start of the new season and all. It's a little bit strange to think about some of the stuff I'm going to say when you consider that Ben Waine is only 21 years old. But the goal that he scored against Adelaide the other day, coming off the bench, right place, right time, following up on a Costa Barbarouses shot for a poacher's finish. That was his 15th A-League goal for the Phoenix, which, okay, not that excessive. He does have a few more in the Aussie Cup as well, a competition he always enjoys. But the thing about the Wellington Phoenix is that 15 goals over the A-League for that team is comparatively quite a lot. And here's the buzzy bit, because by the end of the season, Ben Waine could be a top 5 all-time leading goal scorer for the Wellington Phoenix. Like, that realistically could happen. You've got Roy Krishna way out in front with 51 A-League goals, of course. Paul Eiffel second, no surprises there, but a little bit further back on 33, and there's another drop off to get to Shane Smeltz with 24, and then fourth equal is Tim Brown and Jeremy Brockie, 23 apiece. And Waine, already the club's youngest goal scorer back in 2019 when he scored a goal against Melbourne City, aged 18 years, 145 days. But I mean, well, I'll tell you what, let me list some names. These are the other players who have scored 10 or more goals for the Wellington Phoenix. So we've got the 6 I've just mentioned, Eiffel, Smeltz, Brockie, Brown, who did I miss there? Krishna, Waine. You also got, in no particular order, David Williams, Joshua Sotirio, Michael McGlinchey, Ulysses Davia, Kenny Cunningham, Nathan Burns, Stein Heisekums, Gary Hooper, Rolly Bonavacia, Tommy Hemed, Chris Greenacre, and David Ball. They're the only other players who have scored 10 or more A-League goals for the Wellington Phoenix. Some of them did that in one season, which just goes to show what that's saying. Moral of the story is there have been a lot of good goal scorers who have played for the Wellington Phoenix. A lot of good goal scorers were in that the yellow and black stripes, but not a lot of long-term goal scorers. Not a lot of them that stick around for a long time. And I'm actually not sure that Ben Waine is going to change that either, because Ben Waine's already had some offers from overseas. Did sign a new contract last year to stay with the Knicks for another year or two, but suspect maybe not a guy who's going to be playing the prime of his career for the Wellington Phoenix. But by the time he leaves, he might well be right up there on that goal chart.
My stats here revolve around Aotearoa Kiwis in the Rugby League World Cup, and I have been thinking about this Kiwis team and what is interesting me. Obviously, the forward pack. Everyone loves the Kiwis forward pack. You know, a lot of big boppers, a lot of the game's best forwards, edge forwards, middle forwards, skillful forwards, every type of forward that is good in the NRL is in this Aotearoa Kiwis team. Small humans, big humans, everything in between. It's all there for Aotearoa Kiwis. But the most exciting aspect of Aotearoa Kiwis Rugby League is the running ability of the halves, the running ability of the fullback, and the running ability of the hooker, Brandon Smith. The starting halves are probably going to be Dylan Brown and Jahrome Hughes. Dylan Brown averages 125 meters per game. Jahrome Hughes averages 96 meters per game. So both of them are hovering around 100 meters per game. And Joey Manu, his one game at fullback for the Sydney Roosters this year, he ran for 288 meters. He also played at fullback for the Aotearoa Kiwis against Tonga, where he ran for 400 meters. In that same test, Joey Manu and Brandon Smith, they combined for 13 dummy half runs and 181 meters, averaging 13.92 meters per dummy half run. So if like Brandon Smith and Joey Manu, they average 14 meters when running out of dummy half. As we know, the rugby league defensive line is 10 meters away from the ruck. So they average 14 meters every scoot out of dummy half. And everything I'm learning about rugby league, especially the NRL this season, is that you need your halves running and you need as much of a running threat through the middle as possible. Well, the halves are averaging 100 meters per game in the NRL. Joey Manu is one of the best runners in the world. And Brandon Smith, he wants to play hooker. That's why he's going to the Sydney Roosters. He doesn't want to be a middle forward anymore. He wants to be a hooker because he's one of the best hookers in the world. And what is that based around? His running game out of dummy half. He also just happens to be so powerful that he can play middle forward for the Storm as well. So I don't know if we're going to see that tested, or that I don't know if those stats are going to be that interesting against Jamaica or Lebanon, you know, some of those nations. But I think as the World Cup rolls along, as the Kiwis play more intense games, you're going to see the value, and you can tap in with the running ability of Dylan Brown, Jahrome Hughes, Joey Manu, and Brandon Smith. They are all exceptional runners. And when you think about what the halves need to do, they need to play direct. They need to engage defenders in front of them. Brandon Smith's doing that around the ruck. So if Brandon Smith's doing that around the ruck, think about the space it creates for Dylan Brown on one side and Jahrome Hughes on the other side. And if Brandon Smith's scooting out of dummy half, Joey Manu might take the next scoot out of dummy half. And what are those middle defenders doing? They're chasing everyone around the park. And that's how the Kiwis are going to win the World Cup wildcard. Another World Cup. There's a lot of World Cups seem to be happening right now, wildcard. Sneaky one here, deep in the mangroves. You've got the Under-17 Women's Football World Cup.
Yeah, the sneakiest of all the sneaky World Cups that are coming up. This one actually starts in like a day or two. It's pretty much over the next 2 weeks. The Kiwi women are going to be, well, I'll put it this way, the last time an under-17s women's team went to a World Cup, they came third in 2018, I think it was. There was obviously a cycle in between, got cancelled due to the pandemic, so it's been a couple swings since then. But I mean, this under-17 World Cup that's in India currently is where this tournament is going to be. I think they're really good. I think they're really, really good. I think they have the potential to do some damage at this one as well and maybe get out of their group stage again. Their group is difficult. They have Germany, Nigeria, and Chile. I don't rate well, I mean, it's hard to say. I was going to say I don't rate the chances against Germany necessarily. The other two might be winnable games, but you also don't. I mean, the under-20s played Germany and they lost, but were relatively competitive at their World Cup recently. And you can't judge a youth grade team based on like the caliber of the senior team. It just doesn't work that way. And also, this team, from what I hear, is sneaky drawing a warm up game against Canada, which is a fantastic result and shows that A, they can score goals, and B, they're you know they can compete with strong, traditionally strong youth development nations. So they are stacked with talent, many of which is familiar to people who have been following the National League, especially this year. Most players been there, but just a few that I want to highlight to especially watch out for anyone who wants to tune into some of those games. Millie Clegg and Ruby Nathan, both playing for Auckland United, both Kate Shepherd Cup champions recently. Also, both went to the Under-20 World Cup. They're the two youngest players at the Under-20 World Cup, and the only two players who were backing up from that also going to the Under-17s. Millie Clegg was actually starting all those games for the Under-20s. Scored a great goal against Colombia. The best striker prospect I've seen coming out of Aotearoa for ever. I mean, I haven't followed it as closely for that long, but just definitely in the time I've been writing about domestic football, she is the most exciting number 9 specifically. Ruby Nathan is also just more of an attacking midfielder, also a very, very, very handy creative player. Helena Errington is there, not playing National League this year, but she did play National League last year as like a 16-year-old, and I thought she was quite honestly like one of the best players in the competition, even at that age. Playing for Capital. She's from the Ole Academy, playing for Western Suburbs. I did hear that she spent some time with the Wellington Phoenix Academy, but I'm not sure if that's true or not. Midfielder, great tempo of passing. Just someone who picks up the ball, moves it around like the Spanish midfielders of old, back when that team was winning World Cups, and very much in the Ole Academy mold as well. You've seen a lot of like silky midfielders coming through there on the men's side, and Ryan Thomas and Marko Stamenic and guys like that. Well, here's an example of a young Wahine coming through the Ole Academy as well. Also chucking fullback Suya Herring and Manaya Elliott. Herring on the left, Elliott on the right. I assume those two will start. I don't know. I'm just guessing here, but based on what I've seen from them, they're both outstanding prospects. Herring is an Aucklander who has been playing for Northern Rovers. She's honestly like Ellie Riley vibes about how calm and composed she is about the way that she plays at the back there. Good left foot. Manaya Elliott is from the Waikato, plays for Melville, but has been playing for, I think, Auckland United as well recently. A couple games for them. And she's just, she's small, she's young, but she's like combative, like a good Waikato fullback should be, gets stuck in and works pretty hard. And I'll chuck in Olivia Ingham as well, because she's one of 2 players assigned to the Wellington Phoenix Academy. She's probably the best of them. Olivia Ingham played for Capital alongside Errington last year and scored a few goals, looked very good, creative winger. Probably the best player right now at that next academy who isn't on like a senior deal or anything now that Mickey Robertson's got that boost up. So another one to watch there. I could go through the rest of the squad because there's interesting notes on pretty much all of them, but I think I might just leave it there and have a breathable podcast.
Deep in my mangroves, we are preparing for the Aotearoa domestic cricket summer, and I have done the Otago, Canterbury, Wellington, and Central contracted player list roundup, breakdown, information drop. Next up is the Northern Districts Knights / Northern Brave, whatever the fuck they're called these days, Northern Districts. And I'm going to be breaking their contracted player list down in the coming days. And I think it is rather interesting that the Northern team can bid farewell to Ish Sodi, who moves to Canterbury, as well as Brett Randall, who was the leading wicket taker in the Plunkett Shield last summer, 31 wickets and an average of 11.5 or something like that. And Northern's all good. They're all good. There's no dramas. Like, they literally have lost 2 of their best cricketers. Brett Randall only really played Plunkett Shield last summer, so he was a monster in Plunkett Shield, but he moves to Central districts to get more opportunities in different formats. But he was the leading wicket taker in the Plunkett Shield, and Ish Sodi, anytime he's playing for Northern, he's snaring wickets as well. And Northern just all good. Like, in those specific roles, Northern have Joe Walker and Freddie Walker, who have sat behind Sodi and Santner in the spin department for at least 5 years. I think Joe Walker's been there as long as Santner and Sodi, if not longer. He had a breakout Super Smash campaign last summer, and he's a consistent offie who's going to get a lot more game time with Sodi's departure. And he's got a brother, Freddie Walker, who's also a spin bowler as well. And Northern have Tim Pringle on the rise. I think he's got a contract for the first time, and he is a up and coming spinner in the Northern ranks who should get some game time depending on what the Walker brothers are up to. So Northern have 3 decent spinners there to fill the void left by Sodi. And what do we know about Northern? They've got so many black caps that they have to be able to absorb the absence of those black caps. And that means that Joe Walker, Freddie Walker, they've already had to play a lot of cricket to absorb the absences of Sodi and Mitchell Santner when they're not playing. So now they just step up. And that's the recipe for Northern Districts. You give everyone a decent crack, a decent opportunity. And then when it's time to, they are ready to step up. And the next bloke ready to step up is Matt Fisher, who went away with Aotearoa A and is a pretty slick, swift seamer who he got a lot of the limited overs that Randall did not get last summer. So you saw a lot of Fisher in the Super Smash, for example, and he is an interesting bowler to watch out for in the Plunket Shield. He is playing this 3-4 dayer that is currently going on between Northern Districts and Auckland, a warm-up game for the summer. If Matt Fisher is playing Plunket Shield cricket, he's kind of mandatory viewing. Because him and Ben Sears are probably the fastest bowlers in Aotearoa, and Matt Fisher's got this, like, Ben Sears is hectic, he's chaotic, he's scary. Matt Fisher is smooth, but he's quite quick, and I like that juxtaposition of styles there, and I think Matt Fisher is primed for a breakout summer in all formats, fresh after that tour to India. Not to mention that Northern also have Joe Carter, who was the leading run scorer on that tour to India. I definitely in the long form cricket, and he also scored quite a few runs in the one dayers as well. So Northern have the 2 best players from that A tour. Like Matt Fisher's a unique seam bowling prospect. Joe Carter scored the most runs, so they seem like impressive blokes to have in your group after that A tour to India recently. Massive fan of Kartini Clark and is batting up the order. Christian Clark is another young character as well, all-rounder who can open the bowling for Northern Districts. And you've got just a really solid team, but the other aspect of the Northern Districts squad is that they have some of Aotearoa's best cricketers who aren't playing for Aotearoa. Neil Wagner doesn't play a whole lot of cricket these days, but you can go out and catch Neil Wagner playing Plunket Shield cricket for Northern Districts because that's what he's going to be doing. He's probably going to be doing some of that with Colin de Gronholm in the same team. So make sure you're checking those lads out. Not to mention you got Tim Seifert and Scott Kugelline. They're on the fringes of the Black Caps. They've fallen out of that T20 setup recently, and they'll be keen to make an impact this summer. Let alone just a really solid crop of Northern Districts cricketers. So I think the idea of like Northern having all these black caps in their group is fun to fantasize about. Like, what's a possible, how do you fit all these black caps into one Northern Districts team? But the real learning from that situation is that Northern Districts, anytime they introduce a new player to first class cricket, they're ready because they've had to wait for their opportunity. They've had to graft and grind for a few years to really get in that position. And all these lads are quite talented. And I think just looking at the contracted player list, Northern have one of the stronger groups in Aotearoa. So just that is top of the mind right now. Write about it tomorrow. Stay tuned. Question time here, Wildcard. We did do a Wellington Phoenix deep dive in the Patreon podcast, but I am curious, after round tahi against Adelaide 1-1 draw, who is your Wellington Phoenix big Donnie?
Well, it's too early to speak on any of the imports. I'll say that. Like one of them might emerge as the big Donnie, and sort of like the way Ulysses Davia did a couple of years ago, but it's too soon. We just haven't seen enough of any of them. Steven Ugarkovic and Costa Barbarouses as new signings feel like good, really important, high caliber leading players who have a lot of good A-League experience as well. But Scott Wooden at the back as well obviously has to get a highlight as potentially their strongest, like most talented player. But I kind of want to go with Ollie Sale for this one. I think Ollie Sale, big season last year. I think he captained them on the weekend too. Fantastic goalkeeper in the form of his life. He's now the All Whites #1. Literally put his body on the line and a few times at the end there. He saved one right in the gonads, which I thought at that point when he did that, with like the 92nd minute or something, 1-0 up, holding on with 10 man, thought when that kind of thing is happening, like your goalkeeper's taking one flush in the nuts to preserve the clean sheet, it seemed like one of those like cosmic alignments. There's no way you can lose from there. Of course, they didn't lose, but they did draw. They conceded an equalizer from like the resulting corner. So unlucky, but I'm going to go Ollie Sale, big Donnie status for the Wellington Phoenix.
I will say,
yeah, go.
That goal was because Ollie Sale was compromised.
I did wonder about that because he didn't dive across his far post the way he might have otherwise. I thought maybe the mobility not quite where it could have been.
Like instead of the stars aligning, it was like, nah, he just got hit in the balls and then he couldn't save the next shot.
Yeah.
Like, I think most people can see the connection to those two events happening. Your question?
Yeah, just the stomach pains making it a bit hard to move. My question is, in the wake of the White Ferns' pretty successful tour of the West Indies there, which in itself was in the wake of the Black Caps' relatively successful tour of the West Indies there, in which we know the White Ferns have tended to be very reliant on their three best batters, Sophie Devine, Susie Bates opening, and then Amelia Kerr coming in at 3 or 4, very reliant on them to score the runs when they win. Got a few more contributions from the likes of Maddie Green and Lauren Down and Georgia Plummer getting some games as well in there in this series. Are you more confident now about, or do you trust, let's say that this way, do you trust the White Ferns middle order more now than you did before the series, or is it just sort of more of the same?
Well, Maddie Green and Lauren Downs scored a lot of runs in that series. So yes, there's only one answer. They scored more runs than they have in previous series. So yes, I do trust that middle order more now. I think the next like low hanging fruit for growth is embedding Georgia Plummer into that middle order and giving her a lot of game time and room to develop, because I reckon she's probably more talented than Lauren Down and Maddie Green. And if she can solidify herself in that first 11, I think that will be a best case scenario. But Maddie Green, Lauren Down, serviceable role players, bit of a battler vibe, but if the other players aren't scoring runs, they need to score runs, and that happens. So Māori ora, kia kaha to them. One more question here, Wildcard. The NBL is happening, shout out New Zealand Breakers, and in Australia. Who's the sneaky Kiwi in the NBL that you've been pondering so far?
Well, Isaiah Leafa from the Breakers has definitely stood out. Good couple first two games from him, getting some fourth quarter big minutes as well, and a little bit of overtime, I think, in the first round. Scoring some points. I think he's 5 of 11 from 3-pointers so far. He made some clutch free throws in the win and the homecoming game on Friday. Probably him, but I do also just think on the sort of the wider scale, haven't had a chance to watch him yet. But I've noticed Sam Waardenburg has got got some good minutes for Ken's Taipans. Hasn't done a lot statistically yet. A few rebounds, few points, solid sort of rookie stuff. But he's definitely a guy with big potential coming out of a strong college career in the States. Who, you remember when Yanni Wetzel did the same thing? Like his strong college career, comes in, plays for Southeast Melbourne that first season, fantastic. Goes to the Breakers, even better. Waardenburg is a lot like that. Like he's very much the next dude in that progression. Strong college career where he maybe wasn't like the dominant player on a team, but he was, the guy that everyone loved, always got good minutes and important things, solid defender, chip in with important points. He can shoot well. was gonna go play Dallas Mavericks Summer League as well. Injured his foot, I think it was, just before that happened. So didn't actually end up getting to play or to do any of that. I don't even know if he went over or not. But that was unfortunate timing for him. But big season potentially from him in the NBA as well. I'm hoping for rookie of the year vibes if everything goes well.
Sam Waardenburg for the Cairns Taipans.
That's the one.
That's the one. That's the one. Musical Jam here. Wildcard. Want to shout out a couple of projects. New thingy collection of songs from Currency. He's got the 8-ball jacket, which is quintessential Jet Life Currency music, and there's also a new jam from Wiki, which is pretty cool. Very insightful poetry from Wiki on his track The Fonz, which might be one of Wiki's best tracks ever, I'd say. As a long-time Wiki fan stretching back to the Rat King days. Your musical jam, Wildcard?
Yeah, new album from a band called The Paranoids. Paranoids spelled with a Y instead of an I. Very good, sort of garagey, rocky stuff. Very much in my wheelhouse, that stuff. So they've got a good new album. Tyler Childers, sort of, you call him like an outlaw country type fella. He's got a triple album, which is actually the one album but recorded 3 times. He did all the songs in a different version on the first bit, then the second part is all the songs in a different style, and then all the songs on a third style. I haven't heard it yet, so I don't know how drastically those styles merge, but I'm definitely he's like yet to do anything that isn't excellent so far, so I'm curious how that one will go. A bit of jazz from Micaiah McCraven as well, very good. And then, of course, headline act at the end of this sort of metaphorical festival that I've just lined up. New Troy Kingy. What's the album called? The Year of the Rat Bags, and their, I think it's Musty theme tunes. great title, of course. Troy Kingy. So it's great tunes, but also with a solid sense of humor. He's having a lot of fun on this one. It is the latest in his sort of like 10-10-10 series where he does a different album every year in a different genre. So 10 years, 10 albums, 10 genres. This latest genre is sort of like it's like an 80s synthy kind of thing. Just like a whole album based around the Ghostbusters theme or whatever. I don't know, but it's good tunes. It's Troy Kingy, so you can't go wrong.
Big up yourself, big up myself, big up everyone in Aotearoa and everyone from another country who also loves Aotearoa and loves Aotearoa sport. We'll be back on Tuesday with another episode of the Nishcast podcast. Join us then. And until then, kia kaha, Māori ora, stay beautiful, church.